To arrive in style, first you have to arrive.
Don't understand what's going on here.
The all-new fourth generation.
This is Lungani Gwala, aka Chocolate Kid Leo. Join our growing show, The Global Sunday. We stream live on YouTube every Sunday, 11:30 a.m. for American MT time. African time, 8:30 p.m. every Sunday. We host special guests. We give you latest news, global news, and the entertainment news. Click the link below if you want to find out more. Thumbs up and some hearts. Cheers.
Hi, my name is Ashley DeChristina. I go by Ash. Make time for what you love and for the people you love. Thank you for watching Global Sundays with Lungani.
What up, world? My name is Jesse Villegas. I'm originally from Phoenix, Arizona. Currently, I reside in Prescott, Arizona. I own and operate a coffee shop called The Porch. Work hard and be kind. And you're watching Global Sunday with Lungani.
For those that don't know me, I'm a singer. I'm a singer who loves God. You know, I'm that singer who loves God. I sing with Him every time I ever sing. So I'm that singer that tells a story.
With anything in life, there will be challenges, there will be hurdles and stumbling blocks, but I honestly think to make it, you need perseverance, number one. Secondly, you need dedication.
Welcome to the Global Sunday Show. Welcome to the Global Sunday Show. It's another day. It's another Sunday. I am so super excited. Welcome if you're watching on Facebook. Welcome if you're watching on YouTube. Welcome if you're watching on Instagram, Diverse TV. Welcome one more time. Remember, today is a day we are interviewing. I mean, it's an emotional, special day for me. I'm not gonna mention that, we always have, top guests on the show because you already know. But I just wanna say it's a very emotional and special day for me. But you'll find out later on why it's a very emotional and special day for me today. But welcome guys. Remember, if you wanna comment during the show, drop your comment below. And if you have questions for our guest today, I'm not going to say who it is because there's people who are here to do that. Oh, yeah. How do you like my glasses? I see you. Drop the comments below. If you're on YouTube, you can drop your comments below. If you are on Instagram, you can drop your comments below. I'll try to read on Instagram. And if you're on Facebook, the comments will show on the screen. So, that's what's going on. I'm going to reveal my panel right now. I know they couldn't hear me because I was muted, but now I think they can hear me. But I know at home you can hear, you heard everything that I said. But I'm going to reveal my panel in a moment. But I just want to say, if you are watching right now and you are on Facebook, send me a comment. I know there's a few people that are friends of mine and they are celebrating their birthdays today. So I am going to be sending birthday shout outs, like only like 3 people. So keep watching. It might be you. But without wasting any time, let me just reveal my panel for today. I hope you guys are ready. All the way from Arizona, Mr. Laden. All the way from Australia. Today I'm gonna say it correctly. Claire Laman. Oh my God! Claire Laman. All the way from Portland, Damon Eston. All the way from Durban, Princeton, baby. And all the way from Durban again, Tilo, aka African Thunder. Welcome to the Global Sunday Show and take over the show. Say hello to everyone.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you, Lungani. It's time for the week in review. My week was really, really nice. Don't have a whole lot to say about it. I had a great time teaching, as I always do. And the weather's getting nice here in Portland as spring is coming in. And just want to say happy Mother's Day to all mothers in the world. And Claire, how was your week?
Hey, hi, everybody. Well, yesterday was Mother's Day here in Australia. And I actually spent the day filming at the Victorian College of the Arts, which was fantastic. It was an Indigenous film. And one of the guys on set actually not only wished Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers, but to Mother Earth, which I thought was pretty beautiful. So, yeah, my week's been great, actually. Yeah. How about you, Ken?
Well, my week again, is a lot about Mother's Day. This is the first time that I've had a Mother's Day and my mother passed away, but she was almost 100 years old. The week has just been an amazing week of things finally coming to fruition after all this time in COVID. So Princeton.
Happy Mother's Day. We're currently celebrating Mother's Day today in South Africa. It's almost 5 to 9 right now. So I spent the day just...
Happy belated birthday, Princeton. Happy Mother's Day to all of the queens on the earth. Being a mother myself, was my birthday yesterday. I turned 31 and we were at a weekend away. My husband took me to Port Petersburg and I spent the previous week recovering mentally because I've just lost my sister to the KZN floods. She passed away on a rescue mission and I spent some time in hospital. Haven't been well. But, the next week is going to be about getting back, getting things back to as normal as they can be. And now, if you would please join us for the entertainment news.
Welcome to the entertainment news. Just a sweet short one. This weekend, we were doing a huge preparation for a music video that is coming out. It's called Please Don't Let Go by Lisa Marie, all the way from Arizona here in Prescott. Obviously, it is directed by me. So yeah, you are invited to Ilonja Corner this Friday on the 13th. It's going to be at Matt's Saloon at Whiskey Row. So please make sure you get there. It's going to be fun. It's going to be really awesome. And just want to send a few birthday shout outs to my friends, Shoshana Rose, shout out to you. Happy birthday, Holy Host. Happy birthday to you. Stay tuned as we are about to reveal our guest. Global Sunday Entertainment News. This is Lungani Kwana. I'll see you later.
She rolling with me. Now she know my whip. They rolling on me. Now I got my wrist. I got bangs, lights, relics. Ready or not, we coming hard, straight from the top. Ready or not, I got my blood straight from the top. Ready or not.
Ready? No, I got all my bando, no. I'm just making all this money, yeah, I'm cashing up. All my niggas in the street tryna get it all. All my niggas by the guap, yeah, we get it all. This shit, hunters, no. Making money, oh no.
We have so many guests on this show, and it's always an amazing show. And many of the guests on the show are now on the panel. But today's guest is a very, very special guest. A lot of the people that come on the show are artists now, and they're starting things and they're doing things that are going to change the world. They're making their mark. Today, we get to meet somebody who really created many of the things that these young artists today enjoy as a landscape, as a range of possibilities. Okay, and our guest today, the person who really started all of the contemporary dance movement, the expression, not just about the normal things, but really in the 1960s, speaking out loud through art, through dance, using poetry, using music, using young people to point out the problems and start leading to the solutions of major problems society had. From South Africa, in her career, and today, from her home in Sydney, Australia, we have Sylvia Glasser.
Hello.
Sylvia.
Thank you so much. And I've had many interviews, but tonight or today is very special because the producer is someone who is a student in our full-time training in South Africa, Lungani Gwala, at moving into Dance Mophatong.
Yes, and you know, it just shows what a good job you did. But I want to start at the beginning. I want our viewers to really understand the importance and the history and the incredible meaning of a career like yours, and hopefully encourage every one of them to do something with their talent that's the same. So let's go way back to the 1960s and 70s, when you truly emerged for the first time as a chrysalis, a new butterfly just out of the cocoon. Apartheid. Africa not ruled by Africans. You, a very talented young artist who could not be silenced. This is where you first found and tested your voice to speak against power, to speak truth to power. Now, my question has two parts. First is, why dance as a medium? And second, what gave you the courage, the audacity to buck the authorities and risk so much?
Yes, I often ask myself, why dance? At school, I did very well academically, but I loved dancing. I'd had classes from when I was 4 years old. And when I finished school, I wanted to do social work or to continue with dancing. I wanted to help people. I either wanted to teach or to help them in another way. And it's very funny looking back because my friends of my mother's had said that I wasn't strong enough physically for social work. I'd had a tropical fever, which was recurring. So, you know, I then went to dance, which was much more challenging physically than I think social work would have been. Why did I become an activist? What made me work in the way that I did? I think it's a mixture of things. It's my heritage, my family, and some of my teachers. I come from and am Jewish. My father came from Lithuania as a refugee. He came to South Africa literally with nothing. And because he was white, he could start a business and get to the stage where he could give both my brother and I a very good education. Also because he wasn't born in and didn't grow up in South Africa, his attitude to Black people, to Asian people, was different from the majority of white people. He had African friends. He traded with them. He had Indian friends. He used to bring home from his trips into the rural areas, he would bring home beadwork, woodwork, and really these things at that stage were looked down by the majority of white people. They weren't seen as art. But as I say, my father's attitude was different. And I was also lucky enough to have a history teacher and an English teacher whose thinking was not in the box.
Claire, on to you.
Yes. Well, it's such an absolute pleasure to meet you, Sylvia. This is amazing. And I've got to say that often it takes somebody else's eyes to see what's in front of you, doesn't it? It's, you know, your father's attitude obviously influenced you and the way that you saw the world. And it was a bigger picture. And that is something that is pretty special. So yes, I'm just thrilled. I just want to hear more of your life. I'm really looking forward to this interview.
Yeah, man. Welcome, Sylvia. So nice to hear from you and your experience and everything that you've been through. I'm also quite fascinated about your journey, even though myself, I'm not a dancer. I'm more of a musician. But like, I know we probably have a lot of similarities, you know, when it comes to art. But yeah, I'm also just quite interested to hear more about you. But from here, I just say, let's go to the news and then we'll chat more a bit later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Global Sunday News and the World News Report. Now today is May 8th, 2022, and reporting for TGSN, I'm Kenneth Ludden. Today we're going to start in Sri Lanka. Rising fuel prices on top of uncontrolled economic collapse, shortages of food, fuel, and medicine. In 1948, in Sri Lanka, they declared independence and decided to run their economy on imported items. So they became a debt-driven economy. And this has now today led to a debt crisis and a massive trade deficit. There is a call to abolish the executive presidency, and President Rajapaksa, he refuses to resign in spite of the uprising. And thanks to the 20th Amendment to their constitution that he brought in himself, giving himself endless power, he is able to refuse to resign. This is just one example. In the Philippines, the authoritarian right-wing extremist president Duarte is being voted out of office. We will watch to see the outcome. Now, the experience that they've had in the Philippines is they had a long time dictator whose name was Ferdinand Marcos. He was ousted among huge financial scandals. His wife is still in and out of prison for different things. And one of the people running for President Duarte's place, in fact, the front runner, is Ferdinand Marcos Jr., the son of this dictator. So we will have to watch very carefully what is happening in the Philippines, in Sri Lanka, and with the freedoms of the people. Now we move to Hong Kong, another democratic nation where there is an election for a new leader, but there is a catch. There's only one candidate running, and the outcome will be decided even though there is a vote. The outcome of the vote is decided by a panel appointed by Beijing. So while the outcome is no mystery, and the new leader had previously been in charge of pushing back against the pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong, there will be one question. Will this new puppet leader be able to gain the confidence of the many millions of citizens of Hong Kong who all want freedom and democracy? Because if not, a period of extreme tension and gridlock will ensue. And as we look at this threat to democratic freedoms worldwide, let's now look at the ongoing war in the Ukraine. It rages on with more intensity, casualties, and atrocities. Russian forces have proved to be disorganized, unprepared, ill-equipped, and without reliable supplies. In spite of this, the Russian army has committed war crimes beyond the imagination, rising to the level of those perpetrated by the Nazis in World War II. Tomorrow, May 9th, will be a very important day in this conflict. It is the anniversary of the surrender of the German Nazi troops, ending the war in Europe. And it is the day, May 9th, that occurred in Russia. Because of the time zones, all of Europe, it was May 8th, Victory in Europe Day. But it was after midnight in Russia. And so that is why May 9th is their day. Now, every year, Russia makes a big spectacle of this day with a parade of tanks, missile launchers, soldiers, and a great fanfare. To prepare for this PR event, President Vladimir Putin has to convince the Russians that he has been successful in some way, even though it is marked by massive failure. To do that, he has not only bombed the port city of Mariupol to rubble, but is desperately trying to oust the last few hundred army men and civilians who are hunkered there. And we will have to see what happens tomorrow. But the very good outcome thus far has not only been a unification of NATO nations like never before. The countries of Europe, Eastern Europe, and the rest of the world have galvanized their unification and commitment to democracy. And even non-governmental organizations, corporations, and multinational businesses have come forward with support of every kind for the Ukrainian people. The world has never been more united for freedom, for democracy. Putin's reckless adventurism has led to a new commitment to democratic principles all over the world, which is a very good outcome of this horrible thing. But now, in our last segment of this world news, we look at the US and the fight over the future of democracy. An autocratic and failed former US President Donald Trump has fostered an anti-democratic, pro-authoritarianism movement, which is producing extreme behaviors and attempts to strip American citizens of their guaranteed rights in the Constitution. The world must take account. We each must decide what type of world we want to live in, and then take action to assure that that is our future. If you can speak freely, speak freely. If you can organize to influence government, organize. Teach your children to think for themselves and to know the difference between truth and lies. But most important, to each of you everywhere in the world who are our faithful audience for the Global Sunday and who are active citizens of the world, if you can vote, vote. Thank you for watching the Global Sunday News. I'm Kenneth Ludden, and now we will return to our program.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Global Sunday. It's lovely to have you all on. We have an amazing guest today, Sylvia Glasser, and I'm thrilled to know that she's in Australia, actually. It's pretty special for me. Now, Sylvia, your house was the mecca for expression, for creativity, for empowering voices in the universal language of dance. The dancers from the African townships often stayed at your place, I believe, Victory Park House, because it was too dangerous for them to travel home at night after dance classes, and especially after performances. So take us there as a dancer in the group. What did it feel like to be in that sort of environment?
For me, it felt very natural. A lot of people have said to me that I'm totally colorblind. And we were there together. I was the teacher, the choreographer. It was my responsibility to see that the dancers were safe. And one of the ways of keeping them safe, if they had rehearsed late or performed, was for them to stay at our house. And sometimes there were as many as 10 or 12. We turned the garage into a studio, so the men would stay in the studio and the women would come into the house. So it was a very natural thing. And throughout my career, throughout my work, my husband, who is an international A-rated scientist himself, but he supported everything I did. And my family, my 2 children, accepted this was part of our life.
That must have been very organic, I guess, to just see that there was a need, yeah.
But actually, I mean, it didn't just happen. As the 2 people from South Africa, well, maybe this was before you were born, both of you, I think it was. But it wasn't a natural thing for Black and white people to socialize or even, to go to a dance class together, because apartheid, the whole thing with apartheid was separation. It was cultural separation, it was language separation. So I didn't just advertise and suddenly Black aspirant dancers arrived. It wasn't like that at all. My husband and I were on one of his sabbaticals. He was an academic, and he always said his sabbaticals became my sabbaticals because I always managed to further my career in them. We were in Houston in 1977. This was after the 1976 Soweto student uprising. And there were lots of South Africans in Houston that time who were leaving South Africa because they were afraid of what may happen. My husband was offered a job. I did my master's in dance there. And when I came to choreograph my group piece, I spoke to my supervisor, and I had collected some of Hugh Tracing, who was an ethnomusicologist. I'd collected some of his recordings of African music throughout Africa, and I used to improvise to them. And I said to my supervisor, I'm in Houston, I can either do something about the cosmos, about space. And I almost kind of apologized, that I've got this music, maybe I'd like to experiment with it. Now, why did I do it outside South Africa? Because again, this wasn't socially, politically, it was no, culturally it was no. For me, as a white person, to be creating something that drew on African aesthetics as well as Western aesthetics, she said, absolutely, use the African music. And so this was my first, it was called Primal Pulse. It wasn't explicitly a political piece, but you must understand that all my work, once I returned to South Africa, was political, because implicitly, once I started working with Black and white people together, it was political. It was against apartheid. And some of my later work, some of which you saw some extracts, was explicitly political. So we got back to South Africa, and I redid Primal Pulse, the dancers in moving into dance, which was part-time, wasn't a professional company. The white dancers performed Primal Pulse again. I started, that's in 78, I started moving to dance. I knew I wanted it to be non-racial. I didn't know how that was going to happen. Then in 1979, this is after my first, what I later called Afrofusion piece. In 79, I was invited to teach at FUBA, the Federated Union of Black Artists. Now this was for Blacks only. You see, this was apartheid. You could have Blacks only, and I would go on Saturdays with some of the Moving Into Dance company, and we would teach, they would teach the children, and I would teach the young adults. So this was still, as far as I was concerned, apartheid. You know, this is what the government was happy with, the Blacks there and the whites. So I spoke to the director at FUBA, the late Sipho Sapamla, and to Benji Francis, the directors. And I said, can I ask anyone if they want to come back with me on Saturday in the afternoon? We're rehearsing for a Moving Into Dance. Said yes, and 3 African men came. Most of the white company were women. There was only 1 white woman. And this was really the beginning of Moving Into Dance as a non-racial company. I had no choice. There was nowhere else we could work or rehearse. I tried various places. The scout halls, the scouts were also non-racial, allowed us. And the one scout hall was dark and dangerous and freezing. And the other one, we all got splinters in our bum. So we went back to the garage studio, and we were there from, well, until 87.
That sounds like very bold moves that you are making. And I imagine that, you kind of became by default enemy of the state. And, for a young lady in that time, you really had to have either a lot of faith or a lot of love for what you did and the people around you. It's very admirable, especially for young aspiring artists like ourselves. There's so much to aspire towards.
Thank you. Well, I've always been stubborn and rebellious. And if people say to me, weren't you afraid? I was fairly confident that my neighbors wouldn't tell on me. Mm-hmm. And also there was a school opposite us, King David School, where my children went to. It was a private Jewish school. And the principal there welcomed us as a mixed company. We would sometimes rehearse on the stage there and in the hall there. So I think within the community, I was saved. I mean, we had some scary incidents, you know, where even I was scared. In 1988, and I mean, this was just when the South African Defence Force had attacked an ANC camp in Botswana. And moving into dance, this is our first tour. By 1988, we'd moved to the Braamfontein Recreation Centre. Now that in itself is a story. How did we manage as a mixed group to get into a recreation centre? Well, at that stage, it was the Braamfontein, the Braamfontein Hotel. I think it's now the Parktonian Hotel. And attached to the hotel was a gym with a big open studio. Why could Black people be allowed there? Because the hotel, this is 87, so apartheid was starting to break down. The hotel was allowed to have international guests. Now, international meant business people who were Black, because, you know, money talks. So a lot of my career was negotiating, asking people. I happened to know the mayor of Johannesburg then, the late David Nepi, and I spoke to him, and he spoke to the recreation staff, who were all Afrikaans. But the other thing is, I came from Polokwane, from Petersburg, and I was totally fluent in Afrikaans. Now, this also helped me, because when I needed to, I could speak the language of the oppressor. Anyway, so the one scary thing was in '88, we were invited to go to Botswana to perform. We had friends there, and there was a school there. And at this stage, once we moved to the recreation center, it was really, I say, coffee and cream, half and half. It was really a non-racial dance company. It was still part-time. So I went with my car, and somebody drove a combi, and there was another car, and then my husband was coming later with the people who were working. And I warned some of the people. There were some men in their 20s. I mean, they weren't kids or anything. And I spoke to them and I said, look, things may happen at the border, but we want to get into Botswana. We want to perform. Can I ask you to try and just cut off? Anyway, we got to the border. We left in the morning, I don't know, about 11 o'clock. We got to the border and they brought sniffer dogs onto the African men. And then they took everyone's passport. Now, I'd made sure that everyone had a valid passport. And they took them into the room, and we just waited and waited and waited and waited. And eventually it was late in the afternoon. I went and I spoke Afrikaans. I went into the room. I saw them with the African men's passports, and there was a filing cabinet. And I said in Afrikaans, you know, what is the matter? You know, is there something with their passports? But I checked them all. You know, can you, oh, by the way, they first thought the only white male dancer was the boss. And he said, no, I was. So immediately, you know, there's this also the male syndrome, like, you know, the banks, and when I had to deal with moving into dance and the banks, sometimes then I would ask my husband to talk to them, you know, because I couldn't get what I wanted. Anyway, So I went in and I asked, what the problem was. And sort of after that, they said, no, you can go. They were definitely checking, the passports with the ANC so-called terrorist list. So we went through, and by this time it was dark, and we got to the Botswana border, and they stopped us. And sorry, before the Botswana border, we were stopped by the Botswana police in the dark. And I had in my car a white woman, or a white girl and a black girl. They were teenagers, sort of late teens. And the police stopped us. We had to open the boots of our car. And one of the dancers had a case there that said SADTA, South African Dance Teachers Association. But South African Defence Force, they just saw the SAD and they wanted to know, what's this? Are you army? Anyway, we opened it and eventually they let us go. And I said to the black guy who I was dancing with, I said, Carly, what did they say to you? He said, they said, if I hadn't been with you, they would have kept you here overnight. And then there was more problems at the Botswana border. So, and also I remember on that trip in South Africa, when we stopped at a garage, we couldn't, the black dancers couldn't go to the toilet, so I refused to go to the toilet there. We had to drive around and we found a wimpy bar where we could all go to the toilet. So there were problems. In '83, I was invited to do a dance program on the SABC television. And the father of one of the so-called, in South Africa, we have all these categorizations, but of the color dancer, who was the principal of a school, he said to me, Sylvia, you better check that Felicity can go to the toilet.
Listening to you, Sylvia, I'm remembering, it's tragic, but I'm remembering Mama Winnie Mandela. She said in one of those videos that they played, after she died to honor her, she said, if you are a black male of my age, speaking about her age, and you've never been in prison, then there's a problem with you. And I just found that to be bizarre, but like every single time I sit with someone and they tell me, at the time I was not even a thought, but all these things that she went through just to, do the right thing and build a career, live your dream and so forth, and help others while you're doing that. The things that you had to go through is such further testament of the crimes of humanity that used to take place in our country.
Yeah, well, I feel privileged, and I was in many ways. I belonged to the privileged class, and I was very, very aware of that privilege. And as I said, hearing from my father, because he was Jewish, he couldn't be in this career, he couldn't go to that school, and here I was seeing the same thing. So, when people say to me, weren't you afraid? Most of the time, I didn't even think of being afraid. The Botswana trip was sort of unusual. I was more worried, for the safety of the dancers. But I had a very, very, and I still do, have a very strong sense of social justice and a very strong belief in the power of education, because the training course, when I started the full-time training, which Lungani did many years later, it wasn't just dance. I always said that people were more important to me than dance. I feel blessed that, you saw some of the dancers. I feel blessed that I could work, that somehow the system that I created with other people turned out amazing artists, amazing dancers, some actresses. I mean, I don't know, do you know Tina Mnumzana? Do you know Tina and Sina Makizi? They, even Kabonina trained at moving into dance. Many of the actresses, Sylvia Magogo, I'm sure you must know from television. Interestingly, I'd lost contact with Tina and I saw her doing an anti-rape advert. She was raped while she was a student at Moving into Dance. And I didn't know about this but I knew she was pregnant in her year of study. And she didn't tell me, and she didn't tell me. And one day we were in the toilet together and I said, Tina, you know, are you pregnant? And she said, yes. I said, but why didn't you tell me? She said, I was afraid you'd kick me out. So I said, I'm not going to kick you out. This was the first year, 1992, of our training. And in fact, she was the only Black woman in that year. And I said, no, you're going to dance as long as you can, as long as it's healthy and safe. I said, you're going to go and have your baby. And I mean, she was one of the best teachers we had, very bright. I said, and you're going to come back and, you know, do whatever exams you got to do and you'll get your diploma. And that's what she did. So, yeah, I mean, I just feel incredibly, incredibly blessed that I was able to do what I did and work. I mean, at one stage at Moving into Dance, it's when we had international funding from the Netherlands, the Swedes, there's the Norwegians. We had a staff of 30 people, full-time staff. You know, we had the company, we had the administration, we had a full-time EduDance teacher team. But it's all dependent on funding as much as you want to do. The reality is, if you don't have the funding, it's very difficult. And in South Africa now, I mean, Moving into Dance is still there. It's been run by a wonderful woman, Nadia Virasamy. It's got 2 associate artistic directors, Oscar Buthelezi, Sunny Boy Mota. But they're battling because then I'm sure I don't have to tell you, you know, the arts are not looked after I say in our country because I still feel it's our country.
Sylvia, when I hear you talking and I think about the kind of courage it took it takes to do what you've done, I think back to something you said after question 1, which was you were saying that you were looking when you were young into being a social worker, I believe, but you were saying your body didn't have the strength for it, and yet it did have the strength for dance. And that's just kind of this very basic kind of physical demonstration of how, of course, you had the courage for this because you're doing what you had to do. And there's just a certain thing when you have that artistic spirit of you have to do what your spirit needs to do or you can't physically do it. And then you can do things that you wouldn't think you could physically do if you're doing what your spirit needs you to do. So of course you have the courage to do everything else called upon. It's very inspiring.
Absolutely, you know, that's why I said it. It was so funny that, you know, I was stopped from being a social worker. By the way, my teachers at school and the principal wanted me to be a lawyer. My father wanted me to be a bookkeeper because, you know, as an immigrant with nothing, coming from a very poor family, a bookkeeper would always be able to get a job. And my mother just wanted me to be happy. So, and I I wanted to do social work or dance. But in my career, I mean, it was many, many years till we could employ a bookkeeper. So I had to do the bookkeeping. I had to see that everything balanced. I became the social worker, as you can hear. And certainly a lawyer, because I had to convince people all along the way. I had to, present an argument and convince them either to give funding or to whatever, to have the company at a festival or whatever it was.
Sylvia, I think your story is quite extraordinary. And myself, being an artist or an entertainer, I don't know if I could have been through the times that you were actually doing what you were doing during the apartheid area, because one can only imagine, I mean, what it would have been like, because, I mean, not everybody's built the same. But while we're still discussing that, I'd like to ask you about your creative child, Afrofusion, which you say was born in 1977 as a hybridization of African music, ritual dance and Western contemporary dance. Like, I'd like to know from you, like, what compelled you to go towards fusion in the post-colonial world of the time and away from the violent rebellion?
Well, as I said, I've become very interested in African music. I'd seen King Kong when I was 18, the original King Kong at the Wits Great Hall. And I just loved that, the music, dancing. And then, as I said, I was in many ways very privileged, even though my family wouldn't be what you call wealthy today. My parents allowed me to go to London to study. And there I saw an African dance company from Guinea. And I mean, this is what, 60 years ago. I still have that picture. And I loved that. Wow. And, I'd seen some mime dancing. And my first lessons in dance were tap dancing. And I loved that as well. And that's what I excelled in for many years. So, I mean, by 1977, when we went to Houston, I'd already choreographed quite a bit. And I found the little contemporary dance that there was in South Africa was all a copy of what was going on overseas. And in that sense, so was mine. Yeah. And as I said, my supervisor for my master's encouraged me to use the African music. And at that stage, it was my idea from what I'd seen, and also my education in London, at London College of Dance and Drama, was as a dance teacher. And we were taught to be able to analyze and deconstruct. So I could watch other forms of dance and be able to, I didn't want to imitate, but to start to do them. So, at that time, the apartheid philosophy, the apartheid cultural policy was to keep the Blacks. So if you were Zulu speaking, you did your Zulu dances. And, in the mines, they separated the language groups like that. If you were Northern Sotho, you did your Northern Sotho dancing. So when the dancers from Fuba came to work with me, they didn't want to have anything to do with traditional African dance, because this is what the apartheid government was promoting as African. Africans mustn't do ballet, they mustn't do contemporary dance, they must do their cultural dances. So it took a while to get the confidence. Actually, didn't take that long, because we had a show in 1983 where we did Primal Pulse again, and it looked very, very different from it did in Texas. And slowly, I began to experiment the dancers with me to find what I call a more African or Afro-centered aesthetic. And I loved it. I loved working that way.
You know, when you talk about the fusion, and in the question, you know, why do something that everybody's getting along and bringing stuff together at a time when everything was butting heads and there was violence and all of that? You know, one of the things that I learned in a spiritual study was that, you know, whatever you oppose, you strengthen. Just by pushing against something, you make it stronger, because if anything, it's just going to meet your strength. But if it's a conflict, it's going to try to overcome your strength, and the more strength you put in, the more, etc. So there's something very Gandhi about the way that you did this. But even in those days, fusion was not really yet an acceptable thing at all. You had Alvin Ailey, you had people who were creating new forms and new systems of movement, but you didn't have that fusion. It was just truly, truly remarkable. And what a statement visually for the audience, that you've got your coffee and you've got your cream and you're the spoon, stirring them up together. You know what I mean? I'm sure that there's so many people that had a romantic interest in the condemned place, had a friend or a family member, or somebody they wanted to help and their friends wouldn't let them. I'm sure that there were all of those things that the example of what you put on stage would have encouraged. The fact that the modality was fusion, it was encouraging fusion of all kinds and finding the harmony between things and the power of being united. Beautiful. My hat is off to you.
I'm also blown away by your courage. You pulled so many rabbits out of so many hats. And just listening to you tell us about how you created moving dance in Mophatong, in your Victory Park, Johannesburg home garage. I'm now interested in the fact that, like, few dancers are also choreographers. Nearly all choreographers, though, are dancers. You've choreographed explicit political statements against the apartheid system. Then later your works deal with urban violence, gender issues, and you include ritual, which is a hallmark of your work and makes it compelling. Beneath the currents and on the surface of your work is the concept of stigma, the monster of civilization's injustice. Take us through your works, your statements, your expositive blasting away at this horror of society.
Thank you. If I take you through my works, we'll be here for another 2 weeks.
That's okay.
Please. We're here for it.
I will start with the work. I've told you about Primal Pulse. Primal Pulse was not overtly political. It was political because in 1983, when we performed it, it had mixed black and white dancers. Now, white dancers were doing African dance. A lot of this person who's become a friend of mine told me, I don't know, about 5 years ago, she said, when the ballet girls used to see me, because I choreographed a ballet for Pac Ballet. I mean, I was quite well known, quite established. That's also another story, what I did for Pac Ballet. I just have to tell you this. This was the White Ballet Company. So I took this story, The Soul of the White Ant, and essentially, in the end, the black ants come, and this is in the State Theatre no blacks are allowed in the State Theatre in 1983. But at the end of my ballet, they had masks and things. The black ants came and they completely destroyed the white ant kingdom. Now, I never understood why PAC didn't invite me back to do anything else. To you? So, okay. In 87, when the company was really mixed, and I don't say I did, you see, because also my choreographic process was interactive. We created rattle dance, and we did that for the 10th anniversary. We had now moved to Braamfontein, where we had a big studio, and also, don't ask me how, but they talked about it for 20 years later. I managed to get a sprung dance floor from USIS, United States Information Service. And after that, you know, I used to get cultural attachés come to me and say, you know, you weren't meant to get that floor. I don't know how you got it, you know. Anyway, so we created this dance, and it was with foot rattles, which I'd collected on my trips. In 1986, I went with an Afrikaans colleague from what was then the UJ, it was an Afrikaans university. I went to Venda, and she had written a thesis on the dances of the Venda. And I also learned some of the dances. And this is why, you see, my background, Jewish background, there's a Jewish mayor, there's a Jewish principal, now there's an Afrikaans colleague. I go with her to Venda and learned some of the Venda dances, and also got these foot rattles. They seed pods, the real ones. They also make them in plastic now. So we did this dance. I was very interested in African polyrhythms. And actually, I did do some workshops where I learned more about polyrhythms. So rattle dance was with about 16 dancers, 8 black and 8 white. Some of them had only had maybe a year's part-time training. And it was so exciting just to see them all together and the rhythms. And it was nearly all, you know, based on rhythms. So that was an implicit. But in 1986, I was going to a music workshop in the township in Soweto. I have no sense of direction. A friend of mine had taken me there. And so I drove there, and as I drove past, I passed a burning bus, and I think, oh, you know, the bus is caught on fire. And I drive to the Funda Center, this is in Soweto, and I hear a lot of shouting. And eventually they say, what are you doing here? I said, I've come for the music on African dance. And they said, no, the teacher hasn't come. It's too dangerous to drive here today. So I drove back in my little Ford Anglia, and my daughter was home from university, and I was meeting her in one of these white suburban shopping centers. And I went to the shopping center, and the difference just hit me. So I created a work called For Whom the Bell Tolls. You know, ask not for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. And in this, I mean, this was explicit. There was a set, by the way, the dancers made the sets, the costumes, whatever. There was a barbed wire set, and we collected from the newspapers all the photographs of the students protesting, of the police chasing students. And I also got, and this architect in the company made slides, but also of the Holocaust. I had slides of the Holocaust and from Picasso's Guernica. And while this was going on, I had two people playing cards throughout the whole dance, which was about half an hour. So they played cards while all these things were being projected. And then a woman, a white woman, because it was mixed black and white, came on in her bikini and she put her towel down and she painted her nails while all the stuff was going on. So this was as explicit. And then there were the group who were doing all the kind of angsting, you know. So this was as explicit as you could be. But it was interesting. You spoke about audience, Ken. We didn't, I kind of lost the traditional dance audience, but we built up very slowly an audience of students, of musicians, of theatre people. And it was a different audience. So these were the people that came to see my work, because a lot of it was very disturbing and you know, they wouldn't want to see that. So that was explicit. There was man is an island. This is when people in the suburbs were building walls, high walls. And we did a dance sort of based on that with boxes and that was, I suppose, if you were politically aware, was also explicitly political. It ended with a white man having the boxes built around him and with his tube, because at that stage the Prime Minister was P.W. Botha and he used to do this all the time. So we sort of had the man with his paper tube, you know, conducting everything. And then, I mean, I'm going to jump to the two you saw extracts. And now I'm talking about 2006. I mean, the gender-based violence. And I mean, when we did research for that in 2006, every 6 minutes, a woman was raped. I think it's probably got worse now. So we collected articles just from the newspaper. And after about 6 months, I mean, we had 2 boxes, you know, and then there was a story of a little girl who went to the shop with her 2 rand and, you know, she disappeared and this man had taken her and raped her. I mean, so in Blankets of Shame, I used that idea with the doll. But also in Blankets of Shame, the whole thing of stigma, I didn't want to show the rape or the pedophilia. I showed what led to it. And then the blanket came up and you just saw the action behind the blanket. And that was, I mean, that piece disturbed people, but it was probably that and my work Transformations, which I haven't spoken about. Blankets of Shame probably had more impact than any other work because we had funding from an EU organization. So this work traveled to, must have been about 50 schools. And we got the comments from the students and the teachers. We had to get them for our report. And we had the most amazing kind of feedback. One teacher said, if everyone saw this, you know, rape would stop. And I remember we worked with an organization, a counseling organization, who would go with the dancers. And I remember we were doing a run through the first time with the funder there and the counselors, black counselors, young black counselors. And the funder said, you need to make this so that people under 16 don't see it. And the one counselor said, there are kids who less than 10 who are witnessing this. You can't keep this just for over 15.
It was like you went way beyond dance and now to like production design and, you know, telling stories through it and fighting social ills. There's actually a show out called The Articulation, and I'm thinking of that as well. Through the arts, you know, fighting through the arts. I'm so inspired.
I mean, many of the people that I've trained, I say I because the course wasn't just me teaching. I invited people who I thought had the right kind of mindset. You know, many of the people who are choreographing now are choreographing work which deals with social issues as well.
Sorry. Yeah, just still watching Global Sundays, and let's go to the news.
She rolling with me, now she know my whip. They rolling on me, now diamond rings. I got bangs, lights, relics. Ready, 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 ready or not, we coming hard straight from the top. Ready or not, I got my bros straight from the top. Ready or not.
Ready? No, I got all my bands on, no. I'm just making all this money, yeah, I'm cashing up. All my niggas in the street tryna get it all. All my niggas by the guap, yeah, we get it all. This shit, hunters, no. Making money, oh no.
Welcome back to the Global Sunday News. Here with your COVID update, I'm Kenneth Ludden. Think about this number, 6,250,000 dead worldwide, 996,000 in the United States alone, dead of COVID. But because of underreporting, because of fear of ostracization, the World Health Organization estimates that the real number of dead worldwide is more than 15 million people. The worst variance for death and illness was caused by the Delta variant. The most contagious variant for the spread of the disease was the Omicron variant. We are now experiencing a fifth wave, and there are now 4 new variants from the Omicron variant. 2 of them are being seen for the first time in South Africa this last week. Here is the concern. These new variants seem to have the outer protein envelope very similar to Omicron, with some new features that make it even not only much more transmissible, but it can break through the vaccines. But inside of that protein envelope, called a spike protein because it has the little knobs on it that attach to the cells, and that's how they deliver the virus that's inside the protein to your cells. Inside of this version is the more deadly Delta variant. And this is why it is being watched so carefully. Now, prior to these latest variants, the fifth wave has crushed China. It has put Australia back into a very, very bad situation. Europe has been on a very high alert with lots of cases and hospitalizations, and it's just starting to become apparent in the United States. It has also hit places like Japan and Peru around the world. This is a virus. This is a medical condition. It is not a political movement. It is not a threat to your freedom. It is not the government controlling you or restricting you. Please take it seriously. This is Kenneth Ludden reporting for the Global Sunday News, and now we return to our conversation with Sylvia Glasser, who on this Mother's Day is our beloved Magogo.
We are dancing in.
Welcome back, everybody. So Sylvia, dance, expression, choreography, social activism, those are full-time life commitments. They require absolute focus, dedication, but it wasn't enough. So what drove you to go beyond and beneath all of that to create EduDance, this methodology that teaches basic general school subjects in the late 1980s?
In 1989, through a contact, an administrator at my husband's department, Dance Mophatong, she said she'd like to organize that some Black children come to the Bromford Recreation Center, because I had been teaching white children creative movement in Victory Park. And on Saturday mornings, because we worked the whole weekend, because at that stage, it was still all part-time. So the African children came, they came in a combi, And I found, because they had been through Bantu education and also come generally from socioeconomic underprivileged backgrounds, they had never been to a park. They had never been to a cinema. So I found that there was this huge difference, and that I started to teach things like basic arithmetic, which is great fun, through dance, using their names and addition and subtraction. And then in 1992, when I started the Community Dance Teachers Training course, which was full-time, the students learned EduDance. Now, you can't really learn EduDance. The good thing that I felt with EduDance, especially for the Black children, was it was interactive. In many of these schools, the teachers would just be there and they would have to repeat everything and do everything by rote. Whereas with EduDance, they're involved and their whole bodies are involved. I mean, there's been a lot of research to show that you retain things better if all your senses and all your physicality is involved. So the students used to learn it, and then, you know, what was going to happen to these students afterwards? So I started an EduDance outreach program. And when we interviewed a new set of students for the course each year, it was only a one-year course, I felt I couldn't take people out of the economic system. I couldn't afford, we didn't have full bursaries where they could eat and live and support their families. So it was for 1 year, but many of the people were able to stay on, and some were absorbed into the professional dance company. But in that 1 year, they learned basics of so many things. And as I keep on saying so proudly, Lungani is a product of that full-time course. So we started the EduDance outreach, and they would go into schools, and this was the company, you know, people would say, how can they have the time, you know, on Friday morning and Wednesday morning to go into the schools? What's going to happen to their technique, you know? But of course, they got much more by going and teaching others. So they would go into schools and teach EduDance. And ideally, the school teachers were meant to be involved. But of course, mostly the school teachers went and had a free period. And this grew. Again, when we were getting the international, the Netherlands, Swedish funding, we were sending 30 teachers out every Wednesday and Friday morning, each to their own school. And this was throughout the year. And then at the end of the year, we'd also have, they would choreograph something and there would be performances. But the main thing was the educational value. And we taught science, the formation of water, you know, the oxygen that wants to grab onto everything, and hydrogen, which is very quick, but it's less reactive, and then it changes. And we had it, the blood circulation, the kids loved, because the germ would come and the white blood corpuscles and the germ would have a fight, and of course they loved that. And the 3 states of matter, the 3 over the years, the students in their final, towards the end of the year, would each have to create an EduDance and teach it as part of their evaluation.
I think it's just incredible. Of course, you know, running the Fontaine Academy for many decades now. You know, I want to talk to you after this about maybe having that officially be incorporated into our curriculum, because it sounds incredible. It reminds me, I'm sorry?
That would be absolutely wonderful.
I can't wait. It reminds me of the work of American choreographer Liz Lerman, who she went to CERN in Switzerland, to the big particle accelerator, all of that. And what she did was she used dance to do exactly what you said, but she took all of the scientists and the physicists at CERN and had them dance out what the particles were doing and how they were changing things.
How wonderful. We did the carbon chain, and we did this at a conference in Sydney in 1994, Daisy Dance and the Child International. And, you know, they used balloons. And I mean, also what I found is the students, you know, who were mostly 18 years and over, many of them had had such a terrible education. So they were also learning through EduDance, and especially through the mathematical, rhythmic things we were doing. And I would love to have it as part of a curriculum, because
yeah, I think it's so true. And you know, some of the fusion of socioeconomic status and all that is still going on at the Margot Fontaine Secondary School in Durban. There's 600 students. All of them are Black. All of them come from the townships. And the school opened in 1975, and it has produced, like your education program, many, many leaders in all different fields. It's having such an impact. And speaking of studies, you know, there are studies that also show that people that they say, how do they have the time? People that the students who are in structured dance and drama programs on top of their schoolwork do much better in their schoolwork than the ones who have idle time. Another thing that they've learned is that if you're sitting and reading a book to a child on your lap, if you have the child turn the page, what happens is when one of your arms goes across the center line of your body, whatever you just heard or witnessed gets put into your active memory. It's sort of like, you know, in the old cash register, you do all of the numbers and then you pull down the handle and it would make it so. And so we are learning that dance and movement and expression are so much more part of developing your brain, understanding the world around you, being part of the world around you. It's truly remarkable.
I mean, one of the things, you know, that I'm most proud of is developing leaders. By 1997, we'd appointed 2 associate artistic directors who were both Black. And the one was Vincent Mansui, who's become very famous in his own right. And the other one was David April, who then, by 2003, was the co-executive and artistic director. And then after that, I handed over the executive, and I just stayed on as artistic director. So the whole thing is also developing leaders, and currently the 2 associate artistic directors at Moving Into Dance are Oscar Buthelezi and Sunny Boy Motau. So this whole thing, I think it's so important. And at the beginning, I was just talking and I said, I miss South Africa, I miss the dance activity. But I think it was the right time to actually leave the country. That's not why I left, but, and hand over to a Black or an Indian leadership, an Asian, you know, it was the time.
I'm still blown away by the wholesome approach that you've applied, to grooming these leaders and to raising. I mean, I have a 3-year-old, and listening to yourself and Mr. Laden, I'm getting ideas on, how I can nurture, his gifts and get him interested in certain things and also, be attentive to what interests him. I'm really also blown away by the perfect balance of humility that I see in you. I mean, you're so humble, and at the same time you're as bold as a lion, and I just don't know how you've done all this.
Thank
but
you.
well done.
I have to agree, Tilo, and I admire your chutzpah as well. It's just what I'm hearing in everything that you've been telling us is that you've seen the world through different lenses, and there is nothing that has stopped you. It's sort of like it's that wonderful thing of courage. You just, without even thinking, oh, I'm being courageous, you're just going ahead and you've done all these things and gone, well, why not? Which is the most amazing way to be. It's extraordinary. I am absolutely loving listening to you.
Thank you.
Such a treat.
And I haven't even spoken about my book. I don't know how much time we've got, but I also picking up on leadership. In South Africa, one of the sort of highest commissions you can get is to be a Standard Bank Young Artist. And then you get funding to create a new work for the National Arts Festival in Grahamstown. And 8 of the choreographers who've got this award over the years, over about 20 years, came out of moving to dance, and most of them I mentored as choreographers. There's Gregory Makroma. Sorry, I didn't get my click. I'm going to do it again. Makroma, who, I mean, as we're talking, he's working in London. His work's been seen absolutely everywhere, in the UK, in France, in America. And he has his own company, and he actually formed his own company. And at the time, I invited him back to be associate artistic director. So it also showed that you could be, in a sense, competitors, but you could still work together. And I think that's something also very important, especially in the dance community. I did that with several people. I did it with the late Jackie Samela in the early 90s, who used to send people to moving into dance to be trained, and then they would go back to perform in his company.
One of the things that I think so embodies that unique kind of competition in the arts is hip hop as a dance form. It's a street dance form. It's about innovation. It's about personal expression. And it's a competition in that each person who gets up tries to outdo the last person. And when they do, everybody cheers them on. And then somebody tries to go farther and farther. It's not competition against each other to have a winner. It's competing with each other to keep pushing the envelope, to keep going farther, exploring more, and expressing more vitally what the unique message is that each person has to express. I wanted to keep talking more about education. I am an educator, and just to sort of show a little bit to our public, in 1992, of course, you started the full-time moving into dance teacher training, the dance community dance teacher training course, DTTC, in which various styles of dancing, including African dance, the edu dance, contemporary dance, creative movement, and popular South African urban forms. Where does this go next? You've created an amazing coral reef. How do we keep it alive and growing?
Under a different form. because when the international funding stopped, because the government said they wanted to be in control and they would fund the arts, ha ha ha. Anyway, so it changed from the CDTTC to the Moving into Dance Performing Arts Training Course in 2005. And it was meant to get funding from the CETAs, that's the trade or the training body. Sorry. And that happened intermittently. So really, I mean, to be honest, Moving into Dance is still there. It has contracted because of the lack of funding. I still am an advisor unofficially. I get on very well with the director, Nadia Virasamy. They would have more edudance if there were more teachers, if they could fund more people. I think to keep it going, honestly, is a matter of funding, of lobbying, of advocating for the organization. They do put in their website that they hold my ethos and beliefs. I don't want them to be in my shadow. I don't want them to wear my shoes, but I think it's worthwhile supporting them. I need a cough break.
Okay.
I haven't spoken about my book. When's somebody going to ask me about my book?
Yeah, I was just about to ask you that, since you're on that topic of education, and I must say, I've been enjoying listening to you, Sylvia. And like with all the knowledge and the experiences that you've had throughout your life, and like just from the beginning right up until now, even you moving to another country, I was gonna say this is a wise lady. How can she not have a book out? And there, obviously now obviously the cat's out the bag, that you kind of have a book out, you know, and I can see you want to talk about that. So maybe we'll just give you a little bit of time and you can mention something about that.
Okay, it comes from a work I choreographed in 1992 called Transformations with the Sea. This was also a political statement because it was based on the rock art and the meaning of the rock art of the San or Bushmen. These were the original inhabitants of Southern Africa. And I had gone back to university to study social anthropology in 1987. And in part of my studies, we came across how the South African Defence Force were using the San or the Bushmen as trackers. Sorry. So my anthropology professor, the late David Hammond Took, sent me to David Lewis Williams, who was the head of the archaeology department. And when he heard what I wanted to do, he started asking me questions. He said, how would you feel if someone without any real deep knowledge wanted to create a work about your belief, your sacred belief systems? How are you going to show what the decimation of the San? And then he gave me, he had one book out called Images of Power in 1989. And in 1990, he had a second book out, and he gave me Images of Power and about, I don't know how many academic papers to read. So this was 1987. I took them home and I decided I wasn't doing this work. But we went on sabbatical in 1990 to Australia. And during that time, I decided, because I'd read a lot about the Say and the meaning and how their trance dance was connected to their religious, spiritual belief system. And I asked a composer who I'd worked with, Sean Naidu, if he would write something which I would create when I went back to South Africa. And he did this, and I'd asked for it to be 20 minutes, but when I started working on it, I found it was much too short. So I did the whole introduction with foot rattles. I got the real Bushman ones from Botswana. So the almost 10-minute introduction is just the men transversing the stage with the rhythm, and they hold the various postures which each have a meaning. They're asking for more power, on the brink of trance, contracted in trance, and they hold these positions. So that was the beginning, and then I got everything from the meaning of the different rock art images that I'd studied. And at the end, in the beginning, the men start and they're very proud and upright. They're in traditional loincloths. And at the end, they're literally carrying bags, an old radio. They're carrying the debris of Western civilization. Now, what I didn't realize, I spent a long time, I mean, we spent 6 months part-time on this, talking about the meaning to the dancers. And there was repetition and turning. And I never realized that the dancers were actually going to go into a real trance on stage. And this became a problem. But on the other hand, this work, it traveled overseas. I was asked to perform it for the 60th birthday of Professor David Lewis Williams, who's kind of this international icon of rock art interpretation. And at that international conference, what was so amazing, there were some people, some sand people from Botswana, and there was some photos of these different postures in the foyer of the Wits Great Hall, a huge, huge hall, university hall, not a theatre. And a journalist friend called me, Adrian Sisler. She said, Sylvia, you've got to see this. Some of the sand people were standing in front of the photos and imitating the photos. And afterwards, I mean, we were terrified. The dancers were terrified. What are these people going to think of this dance? They said, this is a real dance. How come that such young shamans are doing this dance, because in our culture, you need to be much older. So that was a kind of, milestone. I could breathe. They hadn't said, what the hell are you doing? You've trivialized our belief system. And at that stage, Lewis Williams said, well, why don't you write a book? This is in 1994, 96. So, and it took, well, you can hear I didn't have time to really do it. But I had written bits and pieces. And in 2018, I got funding to self-publish this in South Africa. It was through Jacana's Staging Post. They do the editing and the proofreading and everything. And it was with the Dance Archive, which is an independent archive of contemporary dance and physical theatre, run by a colleague or two colleagues, Jessica Denishin and Tammy Ballantyne. And Jessica helped with this. And for the launch, the company performed transformations. Through the years, transformations has been revived. And I went to South Africa. Okay, but one of the conditions of this funding, which I said I would do, was to distribute free copies throughout the 9 provinces of South Africa, which was not difficult because we have graduates in all the 9 provinces. So there was the network. And between myself and I was helped by one of the staff at Moving to Dance, Thandi Chabalala helped me. Those more than 100 books were distributed. It's an absolutely beautiful book. The photos were by John Hogg, beautiful color photos, but it's just not going past, essentially past the launch. It's not, people are not seeing it. So I looked for an international publisher and I found one, and it should come out later this year. The publishers are Cambridge Scholars Publishing. It's in the UK. And I'm hoping, because I share the whole process, the dancers are interviewed, over the years, the different dancers are interviewed. Gregory Makoma, Vincent, but later years, Sonia Raudebi, Thandi Chabalala. So you've got the dancers' voices. Again, it's just not me and what I felt. My transformations from that work, doing that work, was enormous. I write about that. But the dancers' own transformations is also quite amazing. So you have to have me back once it's come out so that I can tell you more about the book.
We will have a book launch international party.
Thank you.
Wonderful to have you back again, and congratulations on the book. That sounds like quite a journey and quite an achievement. Thank you.
It's been a long journey, more than 20 years.
Yeah. And now I believe we're going to check out one of our guests' work, Anniversary in 1988.
This is Rattle Dance, the one I told you about.
Wonderful.
Welcome back to the Global Sunday. We have had the most extraordinary show with the wonderful Sylvia Glasser, whose stories could go on and on and on. And we're looking forward to having a part 2 to this series, because there is so much to find out about your work, Sylvia, which is extraordinary, and your life as well. I mean, interspersed with all of your work has been this rich tapestry that is your life. It's extraordinary. I just want to remind people that the Cambridge Scholars Publishing in the UK is putting out your book, is this right? Southern African Rock Art and Contemporary Dance, Transformations and Transformations. That's right. So that's coming out, which is fantastic. I'd also like to just go around and get everybody to respond to this amazing show.
Yeah.
Thank you
It's
so
been
much.
such an amazing show. Yeah, I've also had fun enjoying and just listening, just so much content and so much information. But unfortunately, we have to wrap up and end the show. Any last words?
I just want to say thank you. You've been teaching for a lot of the same years I have. And of course, one thing we didn't talk about is my son, Lungani. And, there was a period of time that our influence overlapped in his life. And I just tell people in the green room, Sylvia and I were talking a lot of stuff about Lungani, which we won't do publicly, Lungani. We will save you from that. But anyway, this has been amazing. And it just gives me power to keep going. And it makes me see all over again for the first time that incredible hope that is in every single student. Damon.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your work and your stories with us. It's been a great inspiration and kind of a recharge, sort of artistically, as far as inspiration and just seeing what can happen in a life for that kind of dedication. And I'm very grateful to have been on the panel.
How about Tilo? Let's go with you next.
You know that, Sylvia, after just chatting with you for the past few hours, I'm actually going to go and relook at my, how I plan the work that I'm going to do forward and how I approach it, and just to wear all these different hats. I really feel like you've empowered me as an artist, and I just would like to know from you, please, what is the road forward for you, and how can people reach you?
Thank you very much. You've touched me, all of you, by what you said. If people want to reach me, they can either on Facebook, or else I'm happy to give my email, which is Glasser Sylvia, one word, @gmail.com. In many ways, I'm reaching the end of the road, but I'm happy to still advise people, to inspire people, to teach as much as I can over Zoom or whatever. And it's been such an honor to be with all of you, and especially with Lungani behind the scenes. Thank you so much.
Siyabonga Magogo. Bathathe mfana ka-chocolates.
Wow, what an amazing show. For me, I would like to say thank you so much, Magogo. Thank you so much. When you started talking about transformation, since I learned that from MID, I kept it with me. I remember I recently had a performance here in Arizona, and it was choreographed by Mr. Laden, my dad. And when I was performing on stage, I started transforming. you've explained to people what transformation is, and it happened on stage, and it's just like it happens every time when I perform. And I want to say thank you so much for passing on that knowledge. And I will do my best, as Tilo said. She will go and restructure whatever she was planning for her future projects. So whatever I do in my projects, in my plans, I kept everything that you taught me with. And thank you so much for making time to be part of the show. It means so much for me. It's a special day for me today, and I cannot thank you enough. And yes, if you have last words to say, please go for it.
Just thank you. And the only way I can continue is through people like you, Lungani. So who knows what the future holds. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to take a few comments. Let me take a short break and then take a few comments from Facebook, maybe one or two, because I know the family is watching, so I cannot miss that. Let me take a short break, like 30 seconds, and then I come back to say hello to people who are watching.
She rolling with me, now she know my whip. They rolling on me, now diamond rings. I got bangs, lights, relics. Ready, 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 ready or not, we coming hard straight from the top. Ready or not, I got my bros straight from the top. Ready or not, ready or not, ready or not.
Ready? No, I got all my bands on, no. I'm just making all this money, yeah, I'm cashing up. All my niggas in the street tryna get it all. All my niggas by the guap, yeah, we get it all. This shit, hundreds, no. Making money, oh no.
Okay, welcome back to the Global Sunday Show. Let's see if I can take a few comments here. Let's scroll up quickly. I'm just going to take one or two, and then I'll just say hello to Girly Mathe, who's watching right now, and then Megan Molko is sending greetings to Magogo, saying, thank you, Sylvia. I cry just remembering how we, the ballet, viewed you and your work. I wonder how my life would have planned out. Love you so much, Sylvia. All right, I'm trying to catch up very quickly here, and missing a lot of comments. But yeah, I know the Silva family. The Silva family has been the Silva family is watching. Sorry, just give me a second. I'm just gonna try and acknowledge them because I think.
Ready? No, I got all my bands on, no. I'm just making all this money, yeah, I'm cashing up. All my niggas in the street tryna get it all. All my niggas by the guap, yeah, we get it all. This shit, hundreds, no. Making money, oh no.
Okay. Sorry about the comments. I'm trying to access comments, but I cannot. I'm only seeing a few, and they come back and they disappear. I can see Luno Market saying, my question is for you, Sylvia, beautiful, lovely Sylvia. Are you still teaching? I think he or she meant teaching, but it's written reaching. Are you still teaching? And then Positivity says, loving Global Sunday. Shout out to you. And I can see Lapa on YouTube, Ulihle Hlapo saying, wow, beautiful. And she's sending crying faces. Yeah. Thank you so much. On Facebook. Thank you so much on YouTube. Yeah, really appreciate it. I think you did say, Silva Gutene, you are still teaching, correct? Okay. All right. Thank you so much for watching the Global Sunday Show. This is your boy Lungani Kwala. Thank you so much to Tilo. Thank you so much to Damon. Thank you so much to Laman. Thank you so much to Mr. Ludden. Thank you so much, Princeton. Thank you so much to our special guest, Silver Glasser. Oh, I'm so excited. I will see you next time. Same place, Global Sunday. Bye bye.
Sayanyuki, Sayanyuki, Yasuri kama Sayanyuki, Honja sikia Chamsana, Wana Yesu niye Sayanyuki, Dawayaroho, Dawayaroho, Yasuri kama Dawayaroho, Honja sikia Chamsana. Wana Yesu niye dawa yaro. Yeah, keep watching Sunday, Global Sunday with Lungari. Global Sunday with Lungari. Sayanyuki, Sayanyuki, Yasuri kama Sayanyuki, Honja sikia Chamsana, Wana Yesu niye Sayanyuki, Dawayaroho, Dawayaroho, Yasuri kama Dawayaroho, Honja sikia Chamsana. Wana Yesu niye dawa yaro. Yeah, keep watching Sunday, Global Sunday with Lungari. Global Sunday with Lungari. Sayanyuki, Sayanyuki, Yasuri kama Sayanyuki, Honja sikia, Tam sana.